So everybody, it's Xilicks here, and welcome to the very first episode of the MLBA. This is a competitive Pokemon Draft League, just like many others, and they are in their third season. However, this is my very first season with them. They invited me to join a couple months back, and just recently we had the draft for the third season. So yes, I will be playing as the Detroit Torracats. Once again, the logo I have currently, I am getting an updated one soon. I don't have it yet though, so we will be using the original one for now, but the updated one should be in the future videos. I did just want to get the draft recap out as soon as possible because we did just recently draft, and I wanted to announce that I'll be playing for this league, as well as talk about what I'm going to be using for the rest of the season. So yeah, without any further ado, let's get into the first pick. So for my very first pick, and the first pick of the draft, because I was lucky enough to get the #1 draft position, I decided to go with Mega Lopunny. Now, this kind of seems a little bit weird because this league does allow some very, very overpowered mons like Mega Metagross, Naganadel, I believe Genesect is even allowed. But the reason I decided to go with Mega Lopunny first is because the way this draft works is it's a point system. So there aren't tiers, but there's points. So something that may be worth 20 points, there may be a couple mons under that same category. Mega Lopunny, for example, I believe is worth 18 points, and my, I guess, strategy for this entire draft was I didn't want to get anything that was too expensive in case I decided I needed something in a later round. So I decided most of my picks are around the 10 to 15 point mark, and then obviously later on they do go a bit below that, but I decided for my first pick, Mega Lopunny. Now, let's talk about Mega Lopunny. Mega Lopunny is very unique that its two stabs, I believe, have no resistances. Because of the fact that Lopunny has the Scrappy ability, it is able to hit ghost types with fighting and normal attacks both. So that does give this an advantage over a lot of other physical attackers, in that most walls aren't able to stop it easily. Now obviously there are quite a few defensive mons out there that will be able to stop this thing, but it is very fast. It has a wide variety of sets that can be ran on it. It is able to boost its attack through Power Up Punch, and really this thing can break through a lot of teams if they aren't like fully prepared for this. Now this is a draft league and people will be preparing for it, so a lot of my draft kind of has an overwhelming physical offense to make teams have to try to pick which physical walls they want to bring. So hopefully I can have an advantage with either Mega Lopunny or some of my other later picks. Next up, I picked Zapdos. Now, I was on the wheel coming back, so this second pick happened like some 15 or so picks later. I don't know the exact number, but I had to wait a really long time for my second pick, but I did get to pick 2, and Zapdos was the first of the 2. Now, I decided right away I wanted to get some defense, and Zapdos is good because it can resist fighting, which Lopunny is weak to, and it also resists flying, which Lopunny is also weak to. As far as the other types that Lopunny is weak to, we will cover them later, but I do want a strong defensive core to be able to support Lopunny. Talking about Zapdos in general though, it doesn't have to be run defensively. It has decent speed and special attack, so it can be run as a little bit more offensive with like Roost to keep its health okay. It can defog rocks away. You can run it with static to try to paralyze physical attackers. You can obviously paralyze things. It has Heat Wave for coverage. It's a really nice mon, and I don't believe I've ever used it in a draft league before, but almost every time it gets brought, it does well. So I definitely wanted to pick it up because I want to try it out and see how it goes, and I think it will support my entire team pretty well. Next up on the same wheel as Zapdos, I picked up Empoleon. So while Empoleon is weak to ground, Zapdos is obviously able to be immune to that, and I wanted to pick up a Steel type and a bulky water right away. So I figured why not go with Empoleon. Empoleon does have some downsides in that its personal recovery doesn't really exist outside of like leftovers, but Empoleon is able to roar out setup mons, which is nice. It does have priority in Aqua Jet, which isn't going to be super useful, but it can get those weird like niche KOs from time to time. It can be bulky, and obviously just like Zapdos, it does have a bit of special attack, so you can run it sort of offensive or kind of like a mixed bulky attacker. And that's sort of the theme with this draft, is a lot of my mons, like I didn't want any mons that were incredibly passive. I wanted a lot of offense, so even my more defensive mons can put out some offensive pressure. There will obviously be some exceptions to that rule, but for the most part, that was my general goal. Moving on to my next wheel pick, I grabbed Amoonguss. Now, Amoonguss is a fantastic mon in the Draft League. It has the Regenerator ability, so every time you're coming in on hazards or you're coming in on attack, you can easily just switch out to recover that HP. It also does have self-recovery with Synthesis, and it has a plethora of status abilities that will come to its advantage. Namely, Spore is a really good one that comes to mind, but it does have that 100% hit chance with Toxic. It's also able to wear down a lot of mons because it can just take those hits. I believe it does have the Effect Spore ability if you do want to be kind of trolly with random status effects. However, Regenerator is typically what will be ran on it. It is a poison type, so you are able to switch in on the Toxic Spikes to absorb those if they ever get brought. And really, I wanted a bit of bulk that can recover well and just be really fat, because Empoleon does kind of lack that. So I decided to go with Amoonguss. In the same wheel, I picked up Gardevoir. I wanted Gardevoir because I wanted another Psychic Resist, and getting a fairy early on is nice. Now obviously Gardevoir is not probably the best fairy because it isn't very bulky. However, it does have some really interesting utility. It can Wish Pass, it has Heal Bell. I believe it even gets Healing Wish if I ever want to run that. It does have the ability to pass a lot of status around. It can be run Choice Specs or Choice Scarf. You can obviously run Trick to hinder certain walls on your opponent's team. And Gardevoir is also going to be my first Z Crystal user. In the draft, we were given 50 points for our Z crystals, and basically every single mon, depending on how much it's worth, that's how much it would subtract from your Z crystal budget. So I believe Gardevoir was 10 points. I might be wrong on that, but it would subtract 10 points from the 50. So yeah, again, having a fairy type, having a psychic type, I did want a strong special attacker, so I went with Gardevoir. Starting my next wheel with my second Z user, I have Crocodile. Now, Crocodile is just honestly fantastic for Draft League. You can run it Choice Scarf certain weeks, you can run it bulky with leftovers, you can run a bulk upset, you can run Intimidate. It has the ability to sweep with like Moxie or whatever. Knockoff is just a fantastic attack. Ground Stab is great. It can run Edgequake. I believe it even gets things like Aqua Tail, and with the Z Crystal, it'll be able to get some certain knockouts with those weird coverage moves. I also wanted Crocodile because it can help break certain things for Lopunny. So, for example, like a bulky Psychic type that may be able to take on Lopunny, like a Slowbro, for example. The Crocodile can come in, knock off its leftovers or whatever it may be holding, and then Lopunny late game can deal with those types of mons a lot better. For my next pick in the same wheel, I wanted another very powerful physical attacker, but this time I wanted a huge wall breaker, and I decided to go with Emboar. I had a couple fire types in mind. Darmanitan was an idea as well. I believe Delphox was also sort of on my radar, but I decided to go with Emboar because for Zmon, it's going to be really good with things like Wild Charge and all-out pummeling, whatever it may be that I decide to run on it. And this will also, in the same place as Crocodile, be able to break through certain walls that Lopunny may not be able to allow Lopunny to have a late game setup or late game sweeps. The Emboar as well is, you know, you can run it Band, you can run it maybe Life Orb, you can run it Scarf. I'm not totally limited to just like Z Crystals on this thing, which is great. So I definitely think that Emboar will be a fantastic mon for the team. And as I mentioned earlier, I wanted a lot of heavy physical offense so that people can't just bring one physical mon to wall my team. They're going to have to bring multiple. And that's going to make it hard to team build for me because it's hopefully going to limit my opponent's offense if they have to take more defense, which is going to be huge because a lot of my team is not incredibly bulky. Next up, I decided to go with Zygarde 10%. This is going to be my final Zmon of the draft, so I do have 4 different Z users. I wanted Zygarde because I needed a Dragon type, and I also wanted a setup mon that can set up speed, which Zygarde can do with Dragon Dance. Zygarde also, as a Zmon, has some interesting coverage moves, and Zygarde has some good priority with extreme speed. as well as, you know, being able to run things like 1,000 arrows to hit levitators and flying types. This mod is really good in the draft format, and it was a pretty low price, so for a dragon I decided I might as well pick it up, and again, just adding to that heavy physical offense that I have already, this mod is going to be incredible. For my next pick, I went with Frostlass. Now, Frostlass, I decided to pick it because I wanted an ice type to be able to hit certain dragons and just general flying types, ground types, stuff like that, because looking at my team is very weak to ice, and that is kind of a trend with most teams that I draft, and honestly just most teams that everyone drafts. It's hard to cover for ice weaknesses. Now, obviously I have resistances and ways to deal with ice types, but for the most part, like, you know, Amoonguss is weak to ice, Zapdos is weak to ice, Crocodile is weak to ice, Zygarde's weak to ice, and summons, even later on, I'm pretty sure that I picked up, are also weak to ice. So I want an ice type of my own to exploit on that. I also wanted a ghost type to be able to spin block. Now, rapid spin is probably not going to be as common in this meta due to the amount of mons that now have defog, so we may see a lot of defog this season versus rapid spin, but having a ghost type is just nice for rapid spin, as well as, you know, I can Destiny Bond, so say I'm in against an Excadrill, if I'm faster, I can go for the Destiny Bond, and if the Excadrill knocks me out with, say, an Iron Head, well, the Excadrill is going to take itself down as well. Frostlass is also nice because I can set up spikes of my own, I can Will-O-Wisp certain mons, so it's really just a nice utility mon, and it also has two types that I really wanted, so I went with Frostlass. It was pretty cheap, and yeah. For my next pick, I decided to grab Gastrodon. Now, I did want a bulky water, which is why I went with Empoleon earlier, but thinking later back on it, you know, I wanted a bulky water that has recovery, which Gastrodon can do. Gastrodon, unlike Empoleon, can really sit there in front of certain offensive mons and just take hits, just like Amoonguss. The two of these mons will go nicely together, and Gastrodon and Empoleon, they don't really share weaknesses. While Gastrodon is only weak to grass, Empoleon is weak to fighting ground and electric, so Gastrodon is able to take those electric attacks, where Empoleon would be able to take the grass type attacks. So I do have a little bit of options now with the water type instead of fully relying on Empoleon. For my next pick, I grabbed Armaldo. Now at this point in the draft, I was really only missing two types, and that was Bug and Rock, so I decided why not, I'd pick up Armaldo. I could afford it, and it was actually incredibly cheap, so I figured why not, because it does learn Rapid Spin, so if I ever want that for certain weeks, I'll be able to have it. I believe it also has Knockoff, which is really nice just because getting rid of items from a defensive mon can be really good because it can secure certain 1v1s. I don't think I'll be bringing this mon that often, but I did want to pick it up just because it has a little bit of utility that could come in handy certain weeks, and it did have two typings I was lacking, and I figured why not, might as well have one of every type, so I did grab Armaldo. And for my final pick of the draft, I had 1 point left, so I decided to go with Swadloon because it was worth 1 point, and mainly I picked it because it learns Sticky Webs, and I figured, you know, Sticky Webs in my team could be really good. I don't think I'm going to bring Sticky Webs many weeks because my team definitely doesn't rely on Sticky Webs, but, you know, it'll help for things like not having to run a Choice Scarf on Emboar, or maybe if I want to run like a Banded Crocodile and I'll just be faster than things if I'm able to get the Sticky Webs up. Really, I don't think Sticky Webs are going to be incredibly useful, especially because, as I mentioned before, defog is way more prevalent in this meta, so even if I do ever get the webs up, I'm probably going to end up defogging them on my own, or my opponent will defog them pretty early on. So it is something I wanted to have if there was ever a niche situation where I was like, hey, this mon is going to cause me a lot of trouble, but if I can slow it down, then maybe I will stand a better chance against it. So, and also, I think that it might give teams a little bit more reason to bring more hazard control, and in my personal opinion, I'd rather have no rocks on the field than rocks on both sides of the field, depending on the matchup. So if I'm forcing teams to bring defog, that's nice because then it means that I'm not going to get hazard stacked against. I think my team will do pretty well against hazards anyway because I do have a spinner, 2 defoggers, a spin blocker, a way of absorbing toxic spikes. So I don't think that hazards are ever going to be too much of an issue, especially because a lot of my offense does resist stealth rocks. But I did want it just because, hey, you never know, there may be a week where hazards might look really dangerous, so maybe I can stack up hazards of my own to try to psych my opponent into going for a defog or whatever it may be. Alright, so here is my team as a whole for the season. I'm not incredibly happy with my team, but at the same time, I'm not really upset with it. I think I generally did what I planned to do with this draft, which is have a pretty high offense while also having, you know, some good defensive walls to rely on. I do have quite a lot of utility in there. I have ways to burn my opponent, I have ways to paralyze, I have ways to set up hazards, get rid of hazards, and even some weird niche things between Gardevoir and Frostlass. So I definitely think that overall it's a pretty balanced team. I don't think it's the best team out there because there definitely are some incredibly threatening teams. I do think later on in the draft as well, I could have maybe dropped a couple Mons and gone for something more expensive to budget my points better, because we were not required to get all 12 slots filled. I believe it was either the minimum was 9 and the maximum was 12. So at the end, I could have, instead of picking up some of the Mons I did at the very end of the draft, I could have gone for something incredibly expensive because I did have quite a lot of points at the end. But instead I decided that, you know, I think it would be better just to fill out my roster a bit more. Another weird thing about this team is every single Mon on this team does have a dual typing. That wasn't really intentional, but I kind of noticed it about halfway through the draft, and I was like, oh, whatever, I guess that's cool. So, but yeah, I think my types in general are pretty good. I definitely do have some glaring weaknesses with types, but I do think I'll be able to deal with it, especially because, you know, I can run berries certain week, or I can run just like an offensive Mon to deal with something that's threatening my defense. So I think I will be covered in general. But yeah, I'm definitely excited for this season, and I can't wait to see how the rest of it goes. This is going to be like an upload only league, so you will be able to watch the battles of all of my opponents if you're interested in that. I will be linking the battles each week so that you'll be able to go watch them if you do choose. But yeah, hopefully I can do well the rest of the season. I think my team is alright, but not the greatest, but I'm a fan, so we'll see how that goes. I'll see you guys next time. Okay, thanks, bye.